of shadows.
Hi my angels, it's Hailey Reese and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited that you're here and I hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is the stuff that my nightmares are made of. If you guys have been on my channel for a while, you guys would know that despite all the haunted places that I've been and all of the paranormal experiences that I've had, there is nothing more that I fear on this planet Earth than what the human race at times is capable of doing to one another. Today we are diving into 3 true, terrifying Home Alone encounters that had nothing to do with a haunted house or the paranormal, and all the more to do with another human being preying on the vulnerable and the alone. Now, if you guys have been on my channel for a while, you would also probably have heard some of my story times where I've talked about some experiences that I've had while being home alone, one of which being my mom's ex, who was like our family stalker, breaking into our home when I was home alone. I literally hid in the closet, and like a scary movie, he opened the closet door, he was searching the whole house, and was just about to touch me. I could swear he was gonna hear my heartbeat, and then he closed the closet door. If you guys wanna watch that video, whew, it's a spooky one. So today's video is very eerie and very real to me, and it's gonna be spooky. Before we get into today's video though, I would just very quickly like to thank today's video sponsor, Harry's. Some people think of Harry's as just a men's brand, but they don't make razors for men. They make razors for a smooth, comfortable shave at a fair price, no matter who you are. When I first got my Harry's razor set and tried it, first and foremost, I was shocked at the quality of the blade, but more importantly, how smooth my skin was afterwards. Harry's has been my go-to razor ever since because I love that not only can I get a smooth, comfortable shave, but I can get it at an affordable price of just $2 per refill. Not only do I love that I can get my razor refills delivered straight to my door, but more importantly, I love that Harry's support great causes, as they give 1% of their global sales to nonprofit organizations that provide mental health care to veterans and LGBTQ plus youth in need. And Harry's are passionate about providing fair priced razors for everyone, meaning no pink tax and no outrageous price tags. Just premium quality at an extremely affordable price. Redeem your trial set today for just $3 when you head to harrys.com/Hailey Reese. I will have it linked at the very top of my description box. You'll get a 5-blade razor, a weighted handle, a blade cover, and their foaming shave gel. It's an incredibly great deal, but make sure to act fast while supplies last and head to harrys.com/Hailey Reese to redeem your offer. As mentioned, it will be linked at the very top of my description, and thank you so much to Harry's for sponsoring this video. But without further ado, let's get into these terrifying Home Alone experiences. The very first experience is to do with a girl named Janie. Now, Janie described herself prior to this experience as somebody who was often on edge. She struggled a lot with anxiety, and she struggled with this constant feeling that doomsday was approaching. Every little experience that would happen to her would play out in a much larger scenario in her mind. And it was something that Janie was really trying to work on with her therapist. Now, at the time of this particular experience, Janie had recently discovered a new trigger. Something that was really triggering her constant feeling of doomsday coming was that in her city, there were a number of reported break-ins. Now, these break-ins weren't anybody breaking in to harm anybody, but they were people breaking into cars and homes for like senseless reasons. They were breaking into cars and stealing like change that someone had in their car, or breaking into homes and stealing petty little things, more so just nuisancing the people, like messing with their things to put fear into them. But like I said, there was no instances of like death or anything dark in that nature, just a uprise of crime in the city, and this caused her so much stress. The ongoing rising in robberies and break-ins was really triggering to Janie, as I mentioned, and it was something that she brought to her therapist. And Janie was working hand in hand with her therapist to find ways to confront these triggers and in a healthy manner be able to overcome them. Essentially, her therapist was trying to give her these methods and ways that she could cope with the triggers that she was going to face in life. Now, Janie was actually still living at home with her parents. She was just in her mid-teens, and at this time, she'd asked her parents if they would be able to install a really good home security system in order for her to feel safer. She said that she was talking with her therapist, and her therapist was helping her to discover, like I said, these things that would help her. And she felt as though if they put in a high-tech security system, it will alleviate a lot of the stress for her at night. She'd be able to sleep better and be a lot more comfortable. So, wanting the best for their daughter, Janie's parents went ahead and had a security system installed into their home. This security system consisted of cameras in the front of the house, but not in the back of the house. Keep that in mind. And it was like a high-tech alarm system. So they would know at any given point in time when any doors were opening or closing, which doors opened and closed, how many times they opened and closed, and if people were on the premises. Over time, it kind of seemed as though like the robberies were dying down, and the like talk of the town was that it was just some teenagers looking for some cheap thrills. So Janie started to feel a lot more confident, and as I mentioned, she was consistently going to therapy and working through these things that were really scary for her. So that, in combination with the alarm system, prepared Janie for something that she was going to do that was a huge deal for her. Janie's dad was invited on a work trip that also had the potential of being like a leisure trip as well. So essentially, he was going away on a work trip, but his family was allowed to come, and it was going to be in a sunshiny spot, and they were going to kind of make like a business work trip out of it. At this time, Janie had just gotten a new job that she was really excited about, and she was trying to establish a presence in the community because for so long she'd really let her fears and her anxieties hold her back from any social settings, let alone work. Like, she was just super uncomfortable being around people, and this was finally turning around for Janie. And I know there's gonna be some of you that are gonna say that this is not a brave decision, but I want you to understand, if you're not somebody who suffers from anxiety or triggers or anything of that nature, you'll never understand how heavy the feeling of doom can feel. I've experienced it where you literally think you are going to die and everything feels like a daunting task. So it was a big deal to Janie that she made the decision to stay home while her family was going away. Her mom and her dad were going to go away for this work trip. Now, one of the things that she kept reminding herself was that, you know, the crime was lessening in the community, and regardless, she had a security system in her home. So the first few days, Janie's going to work, Janie's coming home, and she's tackling these things one emotion at a time. She's just getting through it and doing fabulous. A Friday night rolls around, and Janie is set to have dinner with one of her very good friends after work. So her and this work friend go to dinner. Janie has a fabulous dinner, and the friend says, hey, you know, there's a party later if you want to come to the party. Now, you have to remember, for Janie, even just going to dinner and being social was a big deal. So she was a little bit apprehensive to go to said party. And she told her friend, look, I'm not really comfortable to go to a party, but if I change my mind, I shall let you know. When Janie returned back home from dinner, she realized something alarming, no pun intended. Janie realized when she went to walk into her home that in the rush of going to work, she'd forgotten to arm the alarm system. Because of this, for the next hour, everything to Janie felt really creepy. She just couldn't get the idea out of her head that the entire time she was at work and then the entire time that she was at dinner, she had left the home completely unarmed. Janie contemplated calling her parents or going to her aunt's house or doing anything other than staying there because every minute just felt scarier and scarier to her. She kept repeating in her mind that she'd forgotten to arm the alarm system. But Janie decided, I have to tackle this head on. Janie went and took a shower, got into comfortable clothing, and that was when she heard what sounded like a door close downstairs, a door inside of her house. Janie froze and just kept listening, and then started to hear what sounded like someone walking around a few floors down. Janie immediately started freaking out and texted her friend that she went to dinner with, saying that she felt like something was super off. She didn't want to tell her friend just how scared she was though, because she felt like this was a new friendship and she didn't want to spoil it, but she was really freaking out. So she told her friend, hey, I came home, I hadn't set the alarm system, and I think I hear someone downstairs. Her friend calls her and tells her that she's probably overreacting, that she just needs to take a deep breath, but if she wanted to get out of the house and feel safer, she could still come to that party. Janie said that she really contemplated what she wanted to do, but ultimately she decided that the fear of going to the party was less for her than the fear of the fact that perhaps someone was inside of her house. So Janie quickly threw herself together, set the alarm, and headed out the front door. Janie ended up having a really good time with the group of people, and her friend said, hey, if you're still feeling unsettled, why don't you crash here tonight? So she did. But here's where the story takes a terrifying turn. When Janie woke up in the morning, her phone was blowing up with phone calls and messages from both her mom and her dad. They were extremely worried. They basically just told her, call us immediately. And when Janie did, she found out that in the middle of the night, the alarm had been sounded, that the door had only been opened once and closed once. The police checked the entire premises of the inside of the house and the outside of the house, and there was nobody to be found. And when they would check the front cameras, they would see a masked man leaving the house with a duffel bag of sorts in the middle of the night, just opening the door, closing it, and fleeing the scene. The police looked through all of the footage that they'd had at the very front of the house, but they couldn't find any video footage of the man entering the home, just the man exiting the home. To this day, they wonder if maybe the man got in through the back, but either way, it proved to Janie that her intuition that someone was in the house was accurate. Now, something that was super unsettling to law enforcement and gave them a bad feeling was the fact that this individual had a duffel bag. Now, what they don't know to this day is if the duffel bag was to steal things or if there were items in the duffel bag the individual planned on using if Janie didn't get out of the home. One of the weird things is nothing was stolen. The family searched the house high and low and couldn't find anything out of place or anything taken from the home. So if it had been a robbery, why hadn't he put something in his duffel bag? Now, this is something that absolutely traumatized Janie because it was almost as though her worst fears came to light right before her eyes. She was trying to work through a big trigger, trying to work through something that was challenging for her and her personal struggles, and it turned out that her intuition on things was true. But either way, Janie feels she's lucky to be alive. In her theory, she feels as though somebody knew she was home alone, managed to break in when the alarm was off, and that because she left and didn't come back home, the individual never did anything. I don't know what to think other than that absolutely terrifies me. One of my biggest fears is like scenes in a horror movie that clearly happen in real life where you're home alone and you don't realize that you're not alone. But that is the experience, or the first experience of today's video. Ooh, like really picture that, guys. Really picture having a weird feeling like you're paranoid, but making the choice to leave the house, and then boom, you find out that you weren't paranoid. There was someone in the dang house with a duffel bag and they didn't steal. Creepy stuff. But let's get into experience number 2. This next experience has to do with another teenager named Phoebe, and this story begins at the very beginning of summer break. Phoebe was an only child who lived with both of her parents. She actually described her parents as the type of couple that everyone hopes to be as they grow older. Like the couple that falls in love young, and despite having their teenager and like all these years under their belt, they're still madly in love. And they were both really, really hard workers. So Phoebe grew up in a gorgeous home, literally like a model type home is how they described it. As I mentioned, it was the beginning of summer break, and since Phoebe's parents were really hard workers, Phoebe was set to be alone every single day of the summer during the day, which isn't unusual. There was a lot of days in the summer when I was a teenager that I was also home alone. I feel like a lot of us can relate to that particular experience, except I usually wasn't home alone because I'm the older sibling. I have a younger sister. So it was normally like the two of us and like our neighborhood friends during the day. But Phoebe was completely alone. Now, here's the interesting thing about Phoebe's home though. Phoebe didn't actually use her house key ever. In fact, pretty much no one in the family ever used their house key. What they would do instead was they would use the garage code to get in and essentially leave the mudroom door open pretty much every single day. Now, Phoebe described this as not an unusual thing in her town. I guess Phoebe lived in like a big house, but kind of out in like not the middle of nowhere, but on the outskirts of the city. So a lot of people just felt really safe and comfortable. She actually said there was people who wouldn't even usually lock their front doors before this whole entire incident shocked the city. But yeah, basically Phoebe very rarely ever used her house key, if ever, and anytime she would like come back from like being outside or hanging with friends, she'd boop, 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 boop into the garage and go into the house. So we're a couple days into summer vacation here, and Phoebe said she had just made herself a really delicious lunch. She'd cooked herself up some mac and cheese, and she was just chilling on the couch watching TV. It was like any other summer day. She was just enjoying doing nothing. And girl, I can relate to that. As Phoebe's watching the show though, all of a sudden she hears a familiar noise that she shouldn't be hearing quite yet. Phoebe hears the garage door opening. Now, her first thought wasn't that this was anything scary or that anything was off, so to speak. Her initial thought was, oh, someone's home early. So she just got up and put her dish in the sink and looked over to basically see who was coming through the door and why they were coming home early. To Phoebe's absolute shock, neither her mother or her father walked in through the mudroom door. It was a man Phoebe had never seen before. She'd never seen this man in her entire life. The man looked shocked to see Phoebe, and Phoebe was obviously shocked to see the man. She said the two stared at each other for around 2 minutes, and then the man came out with this story that he said in a very believable way. The man said, "Oh, Phoebe, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you were going to be home." Red flag number one for Phoebe was, why does this guy know her name? And why wouldn't she be home? It's summer break. She says, "Who are you?" The man proceeds to tell her that he knows that she's Phoebe, and he knows her mom, and he knows her dad, that they actually work together, that he works with her father. And he said that his house, the water was cut off, and that he couldn't make food in his house, and he couldn't do dishes, and he couldn't shower. So her dad, offered him their house for the afternoon to just quickly make something to eat and grab a quick shower, and that he'd be out the door in no time, not to be alarmed. Phoebe found this very weird because, again, she'd never seen the man before, and her parents hadn't told her or texted her or called her to say, "Hey, a man's coming to shower in our house and eat our food." But she couldn't get past the fact that he knew her name and he knew like her parents. So awkwardly, Phoebe just said, "Okay," and grabbed her phone and texted her mom and dad saying like, "WTF, who the heck is in our house right now?" But neither one of them answered. The man proceeded to open up the fridge and grab all these things to make lunch. Another red flag that Phoebe noted was that he knew, like he seemed to know where everything was. You know when you go to like someone else's house and you're like in their cupboard or even in their drawers or like in their fridge and you have no idea like where the milk is or where the butter is, like you're learning someone else's layout of things. Phoebe noticed that he just knew where everything was. He was just grabbing all these things and doing his thing. He made himself lunch, he put the dish in the sink, and he headed upstairs, took a quick shower, and then said like, "Have a good day, Phoebe," and left the house. A couple of hours later, Phoebe's dad calls, and on the other end, he is so confused. He says to Phoebe, "What the hell do you mean there was a man in our house? What are you even talking about?" And Phoebe told him everything that had happened. The dad had not, in fact, told his coworker that he could go in through the garage with the code and make himself a sandwich and take a shower. He, in fact, had no idea who it was. So they called the police, and the police basically said that there wasn't much that they could do, but recommended that perhaps they like put up some sort of cameras just to see if the man should come back in the future, and that they should change the garage code. The man would later be caught. He would try to visit the house again during the school days though, and he was actually caught and questioned by police. They would later find out that he was an individual who would watch people who used garage codes in the neighborhood, and he would sneak into their house while they were at work, grab a quick shower, grab a bite to eat, and just kind of bounce around. He was like a form of a squatter. Now, the man meant no harm. He didn't want to cause anybody any harm. In fact, he was homeless and didn't have any food or resources of his own. So going to people's homes and grabbing a shower and grabbing a bite to eat was his means of survival. But Phoebe, like to this day, is just so creeped out that she had no clue who this man was, and he waltzed into their house. Now, when police were interrogating the man as to, number one, how he got their garage code, and number two, how he knew them, he said that he'd seen little things around the house with Phoebe's name on it, and as he'd been like going there over time, he just knew little things about the family, like where they worked and their daughter's name and stuff like that. So that's why he was so confident and so able to just pull off his scheme to pull one over Phoebe's head, and clearly he did it. I just can't even imagine later finding out that while you were home alone, a literal stranger manipulated his way into your home using your garage code and used all your things. And also, can we talk about how oof it is to think about the fact, like I'm trying to picture when I'm out and about, which I'm always home, so this could never happen to me, but like I'm trying to picture like coming home to my shower, not knowing a strange man was showering in it, my fridge, not knowing someone was in my food and stuff that I don't know. It's just really creepy, and I felt like it was an interesting story to be included here. But yeah. Now the third story is to do with a girl named Amanda. Now this story is really strange, and I know that I mentioned at the beginning of this video that it wasn't so paranormal and it was more to do with what other human beings can do, but I'm going to say that this particular experience is a little bit up for debate. Like, it is debatable as to whether or not it was a skinwalker or if it was a person or what really happened. So I'm especially curious to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on this particular experience. So Amanda and her husband had just recently divorced, and this divorce was messy. It initially began, the separation began when Amanda miscarried their child and fell into a really dark place. I can't even fathom the loss of a child like that. So I can understand, I mean, I've heard at least that it is straining on relationships, and you have to be really strong with one another to get through things of this nature, not just miscarriages, but also just loss of children in general. It's really difficult on couples. Now, one of the ways that she described this was that her husband didn't really understand the depths of the loss because he'd never met the child. It was only a few months in, whereas she'd carried the baby and she'd bonded with the baby in a way that he hadn't yet done so. So while he was devastated over the loss as well, he didn't take it the same way that Amanda did, and this built a lot of resentment towards him from her. She really felt like he didn't even try to understand her. She just felt like he didn't get it. And so the two of them made the difficult decision to separate and therefore divorce one another. Now, in the separation and divorce, Amanda kept their family home, their home that the two of them had bought together. She was living in it. And this home was a really interesting home. It was built by an architect who built it in a really interesting way. There was a lot of different like floors to it, and like just the layout of it was really interesting. But beyond that, it was situated almost in like the center of a forest. Whomever had built the home had like cleared the way and built the home like deep into a forest. So it took about 10-15 minutes to drive down their laneway into like their home in the forest. And that was something that they really liked about the home, actually. And Amanda found a lot of peace in the quiet during her healing of leaving her husband. She felt like she was able to really find herself. And so at night, over a glass of wine, Amanda would often sit out on the back porch and just listen to nature. It was one of her therapeutic methods to really cope and get through everything that she was going through. One night, Amanda was preparing dinner and pouring herself her evening glass of wine, and she was just hanging out in the house. But the way that she described this feeling was this house had lots of windows and lots of layers to it, but it was really, really dark outside of it. Obviously, like if they're in the center of a forest and the home itself is lit, I'm sure you can visualize how dark it must be looking out. Amanda described it as she kept hearing like a on the windows of her house, some of which were higher up than like a human being could reach. So keep that part in mind. But on like various windows, she kept hearing, which is really freaking creepy. You're home alone in like the center of a forest, pretty much 15 minutes away from a road, and you're hearing like knocking on various windows of your home. So that was like one of the things that she noted prior to the experience that was really, really strange. Now, kind of going into like a little bit of like the paranormal supernatural thing though, one thing that I do want to say is that oftentimes if an entity knocks 3 times, it's mocking the Holy Trinity and could be a dark or demonic entity. But that's besides the point. As I said, it's up for debate what really happened here. So Amanda eats her dinner and takes her glass of wine and goes to sit out on the back porch, which, can I just mention, brave. If that was me and I was hearing knocking on all the various windows, I would like barricade myself in the house and skip out on the back porch for that evening. But she was like, that was kind of weird. But like I mentioned, it was also in places like a human being couldn't knock, and their home was very hidden. So unless the person knew her, they weren't finding the home. So she goes out onto the back porch and she's relaxing, and she starts hearing like rustling out in the woods. She described it almost like an animal type thing. It's like going through the woods really quick, but like running. And she kept expecting to see this animal come out into the clearing towards their house, but she never did. It was like it was just running back and forth. So she started to feel a little bit unsettled, but just continued to enjoy the sounds and have her glass of wine and reflect on her day. That's when all of a sudden she hears from the woods her ex-husband's voice say, "Amanda." She said it was so echoey and so distant that she literally like sat there for a second like, am I hearing things? She actually said like, if I had had more than like 1.5 glasses of wine, I would have thought I was just drunk. But she clearly heard, "Amanda." So she sits there and she's questioning her sanity and she's incredibly confused, and she just decides that she's clearly heard something that isn't there. A few moments after though, she hears, "Amanda, come here." And this thing that sounds exactly like her ex-husband tells her to come here, to come out into the woods. At this given point in time, she starts feeling really unsettled because she thinks that it's actually him. Like she heard the knocking on the windows, she hears him calling her out to the woods now, like saying, "Come here," and saying her name. So she gets up and she goes to go inside because she's not feeling good about this. And as she opens the door to go inside, she hears the voice of a little kid yell, "Mommy, don't you want to meet me?" And at that moment, she said it was like all the blood left her body and she just felt sick. She thought he was playing a sick joke on her. She thought it wasn't funny anymore, that they were bringing some sort of kid's voice into it. And she kind of explained it like she wasn't thinking clearly at all. In this moment, she thought that her ex-husband was out there trying to get her to come out, playing some sort of joke or getting some sort of like revenge on her, and that he played some sort of audio recording of a kid saying that, and she was disgusted. So she goes in the house, she locks the door, and she texts him asking him what the hell his problem is. And he responds just question marks, like question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. And he starts calling her. So she answers the phone and she tells him, "I heard you. I heard you say my name multiple times. You said to come. When I went to go in the house, you played the voice of a little kid saying, 'Mommy, don't you want to meet me?'" At this point, Amanda says he just falls silent on the other line and tells her to call the police. That if she's certain she heard a voice coming from the forest calling for her, saying her name and telling her to come out, call the police and get them out there because it is not him. She said she made him swear over everything they care about, and he told her, "Amanda, I am at work working late. I am not in the backyard. I am not in the forest. And if you are certain that you are hearing something, you need to call the police." So she does. She calls the police. She's incredibly confused as to what the hell is going on in her backyard. The police search as much as they could of the forest, and don't find anybody. They go to come back to the house to basically tell her that there's nobody in the forest, and that's when they find fresh, bare feet prints around the house of a man. Like around by the windows. They were such a big footprint, it could not be Amanda's, but it was a bare footprint. It wasn't a shoe print. They ask Amanda to come take a look, and she just feels sick because it was around all of the windows that she'd heard the knocking. But where it gets really creepy is the footprints even go towards the windows that she'd heard knocking on that a human being could not physically reach. She said it was the only time this incident happened. The police wrote down the report and left. They didn't find anybody besides those bare footprints, and they decided to sell the house, and she moved away from there as soon as possible. But to this day, she has no idea who or what was calling to her from the forest and what the voice of the child was. This one is really creepy to me. I guess it was even validated that the ex-husband was in fact at work. It was not him, and she claimed she heard his voice and then the voice of a child. She'd only had a glass and a half of wine. This was typical for her in the evenings, and she has no idea what she heard. Now, whether or not it was a skinwalker or whether it was some sort of sick individual out there, no one really knows. But either way, that would be enough for me to never want to be home alone again. I'd be calling up my ex-husband like, do you want a roommate? Well, there you guys have it. Those are 3 terrifying Home Alone stories. I want to know in the comment section below, which one scared you the most? And do you have any creepy Home Alone stories of your own that you're willing to share? On that note, I also want to know in the last story, do you guys think it was a skinwalker and something paranormal? Or do you think that it was a sick individual playing a prank? Or do you think she was just hearing things? I would love to know down in the comment section below. And that is it for today's video. Once again, I would just love to thank Harry's for sponsoring this video. As I mentioned, you can redeem your trial set for just $3 when you head to harrys.com/Hailey Reese. It's an incredibly good deal, so make sure that you act fast while supplies last and head to harrys.com/Hailey Reese. As I mentioned, it will be linked at the very top of my description. And thank you so much to Harry's for sponsoring. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my content, I would love it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button, and please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, to do all things with kindness, and until next time, I love you.